Ever wondered what would happen if a trade war between Canada and the US sent prices soaring and jobs disappearing? What if the Bank of Canada can't fix it? Sounds like a fairy tale, but that is what's happening right now. Let's dive into the worst-case scenario and see what's really at stake. Today, we're exploring a scenario that could have huge consequences for Canada's economy trumps tariffs. But it's not just about higher prices or fewer jobs. The Bank of Canada's predictions are much worse. And the real kicker? They don't have a clear way out. So, what does this all mean for you and your wallet? Let's break it down. Chapter 1. What's happening in trade relations?
In the case of a protracted, significant trade conflict, it would badly hurt economic activity in Canada.
Tiff Macklem, Governor of the Bank of Canada. Over the past few years, the global economy has been marked by trade tensions, and one of the most high-profile trade conflicts has been the US-Canada trade war. Under President Donald Trump, the US imposed tariffs on Canadian goods like steel and aluminum, and Canada retaliated with tariffs on US products. These moves escalated tensions and created uncertainty for businesses on both sides of the border. The issue was exacerbated when Trump announced his intention to implement broad, across-the-board tariffs on foreign imports to protect US industries. These tariffs, sometimes as high as 25%, would make Canadian goods more expensive for American buyers, potentially hurting key sectors of Canada's economy, like automotive manufacturing, oil exports, and agricultural products. The Bank of Canada is closely monitoring the situation and has laid out a worst-case scenario if these tariffs were to escalate further. It's a situation that could lead to significant economic contraction. This scenario paints a picture of a sharp decline in exports, rising unemployment, and an overall weakening of the Canadian economy. For everyday Canadians, a full-blown trade war could mean higher prices on everyday products, from food to electronics. If Canadian businesses face reduced exports or rising production costs due to tariffs, they may pass these costs on to consumers. This could affect everything from the price of fresh fruits and vegetables to the cost of gasoline in cars. Chapter 2. The Bank of Canada's worst-case scenario. If you take $10 off the price of oil, that's a couple $billion less of royalty revenue that the province has bringing in. Robert Kavchik, senior economist, BMO Capital Market. In its latest economic analysis, the Bank of Canada laid out what could happen if the US and Canada engage in a prolonged trade war, with tariffs escalating as both countries impose taxes on each other's goods. The worst-case scenario the bank outlined is not pretty, and it involves a series of economic shocks that could reverberate through every sector of the economy. First and foremost, the Bank of Canada predicts a significant decline in exports from Canada to the United States. The US is Canada's largest trading partner, so any significant drop in exports would hit Canada hard. For example, in 2019, trade between the two countries was worth about $1.8 billion per day. A 25% tariff on Canadian goods could drastically reduce demand for these products, especially in industries like oil, agriculture, and manufacturing. The US would have to pay more for Canadian goods, which would lead many American companies to look for cheaper alternatives. If fewer goods are sold, Canadian businesses suffer. But that's just the beginning. Impact on Canada's key sectors. Industries that are highly reliant on exports would be the hardest hit. Canada is a major exporter of oil, natural gas, and minerals, so any slowdown in demand for these goods could significantly impact revenues. As oil prices drop due to lower demand, provinces like Alberta could see major cuts to their revenue from royalties and taxes. Similarly, agricultural products like wheat, pork, and dairy could become less competitive in the US market due to higher tariffs, impacting Canadian farmers. Chapter 3. Job losses, unemployment, and wage cuts. We would probably expect the unemployment rate rises about a percentage point or so. Robert Kavchik, senior economist, BMO Capital Market. Doug Ford says as many as 500,000 jobs in Ontario alone. Peter Armstrong, CBC News. As businesses struggle to cope with declining sales, they may be forced to cut costs. One of the first places companies usually look to cut is labor. In this worst-case scenario, the Bank of Canada predicts a rise in unemployment due to reduced demand for Canadian goods and services. The Bank of Canada's analysis suggests that Canadian exporters will lower production and possibly lay off workers to stay afloat. While exact job loss numbers are hard to pinpoint, estimates range from hundreds of thousands to 500,000 jobs lost. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has even stated that up to 500,000 jobs in Ontario alone could be at risk. That's a huge number, and it's not just confined to manufacturing jobs. Workers in sectors tied to trade, like logistics, transportation, and retail, could all feel the impact. For the average Canadian worker, job loss or wage cuts could be devastating. In a worst-case scenario, Canadians could see their unemployment rates rise by about 1%, which would translate to hundreds of thousands of individuals out of work. Ontario, the most industrialized province, could feel the brunt of this, with up to 500,000 jobs lost in sectors like manufacturing, agriculture, and natural resources. This kind of job loss can lead to a reduction in household incomes, meaning people may struggle to pay for necessities. With fewer jobs and lower wages, Canadians may have to scale back on spending, which would hurt local businesses and affect the overall economy. This ripple effect could slow down recovery, even once the trade war subsides. Chapter 4. The price of goods, inflation and consumer costs. What tariffs should do is decrease anybody's willingness to buy the more expensive product and make them come up with ways of finding something cheaper, something more efficient, something closer to home. Peter Armstrong, CBC. With tariffs being imposed on Canadian goods and services, another significant consequence is rising prices. If the U.S. increases tariffs on Canadian imports, Canada may respond by imposing tariffs on American products, making U.S.-sourced goods more expensive. This could include everything from fresh fruit and vegetables to electronics, machinery, and cars. A prime example is the importation of fruits and vegetables. Canada relies heavily on U.S. imports for fresh produce during the colder months. If tariffs drive up the price of these imports, Canadians could see their grocery bills increase. The same goes for other goods like electronics, automobiles, and even pharmaceuticals. American-made cars, which are popular in Canada, could become significantly more expensive, reducing consumer purchasing power. As everyday Canadians, you'll feel the pinch when prices go up. Whether it's at the grocery store, the gas station, or when buying household goods, the costs will increase. For example, if the price of fruits and vegetables goes up due to higher tariffs, families on tight budgets will find it harder to make ends meet. If you're someone who drives a car, the cost of new and used vehicles could rise due to tariffs on American-made cars. If you need medication or medical equipment, the prices of these products could also increase, putting a strain on your budget. Ultimately, you may find yourself spending more money on everyday essentials, and your purchasing power will decrease as your income doesn't keep pace with rising prices. Chapter 5. Economic impact, recession and GDP decline.
There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and it just didn't seem very useful to provide guidance. I think we've been pretty clear. Here's how we see the economy without tariffs. We don't know what the U.S. is going to do, and even when we do know more, we're going to have to do some more work to figure out exactly how that's going to play out through the economy.
Tiff Macklem. So what does this all mean for the broader economy? The Bank of Canada predicts that Canada's GDP could fall by up to 3% in a worst-case scenario. While this might sound like a small percentage, it's significant enough to tip the economy into a recession. The country is currently growing at around 1.8%, so a drop of 2% to 3% would put Canada in a recession, a situation where economic output contracts for consecutive quarters. This means that businesses will earn less, investments will drop, and job losses will mount. Overall, the economy would shrink, leading to a weaker currency, higher borrowing costs, and a tougher business environment. A shrinking GDP means that the job market will be tighter, and businesses may stop hiring or start laying off workers. The unemployment rate will likely rise, leading to fewer opportunities for job seekers. At the same time, if the economy contracts, government spending could decrease, and public services might suffer. Additionally, higher inflation could cause your purchasing power to shrink. You may feel that the same amount of money you used to spend on groceries or daily necessities no longer stretches as far in the way we live our daily lives. From higher energy bills in Europe to potential political uncertainties affecting global supply chains, the ripple effects of these changes will touch us all in one way or another. The increasing importance of Canadian energy exports to the EU and other global markets is a clear sign that the landscape is evolving rapidly. Whether it's in the form of job creation, rising costs, or even environmental impacts, these changes are a sign of a much larger shift happening right before our eyes. The road ahead may be uncertain, but one thing is for sure: global energy partnerships are more important than ever, and they will continue to shape our world in profound ways. The world now stands at a crossroads. The decisions made today by governments, corporations, and global policymakers will determine whether this trade war propels economies towards self-sufficiency or drags them into prolonged volatility. One thing is certain: This trade war is not just a battle between two nations, it is shaping the future of global trade as we know it. So, what do you think? Is this economic confrontation a necessary step toward independence, or is it a dangerous game that could lead to long-term economic hardship? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on the latest developments in global trade, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis and discussions on the evolving economic landscape.